All right, welcome to another Space Turtle Show bonus episode this week. I'm Joey.
And I'm Josh, and today we watched Drive My Car by Ryusuke Hamaguchi. And we had to drive pretty far to do so.
Yeah, it was all in the method, right?
Yes, so you guys should spend more than 20 seconds, right, Joey?
Wow, inside joke about no one watching our shit for more
But
than 20
this
seconds.
is gonna be good. This is gonna be an explained, so you guys gotta stick around, right?
Yeah, we're gonna explain it.
Uh-huh, to the best of our abilities.
Totally.
But I think the first thing is, what were your initial thoughts?
So, I really was. I felt humbled that I even got to watch this movie.
That's so cool.
That's how impressed I was by it. It felt so gentle, like in all of its expression and empathy. It just felt like I was getting a nice warm hug the whole time. And it's one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life.
Dang.
So
all right.
Those are my thoughts.
I think my initial thoughts were more along the lines of, all right, I gotta wrap my head around what I've just seen, you know? There's definitely for me that it's interesting to say, I would say patience for the audience. Whereas whenever you watch a movie, a lot of the times you're you're kind of testing the patience of the director and how like he wants to show you information or show you character arcs um, as quickly or as slow as he wants. But I feel like this film took its time with the audience and it like let us wait to be convinced of character growth and character changes. And I think that was my favorite part of the film, that bouncing off of what you were saying.
Yeah, it does. It just does such a good job at developing these characters and giving them real thoughts and emotions and going through the film. It's a 3 hour run time, and I think we both agree that the pacing was very good. And I think a lot of it had to do with these characters and how impactful they were and how generous they were with the development.
I think that that's part of, I think, an example of what I'm trying to say, and part of what we're talking about is like the different avenues of showing a character's change, in my opinion. In the film, there goes through a lot of different situations that the main character is in. And because of how, I guess, stoic you could say the main character is, there are minute expressions of his feelings and his turmoil through other mediums, like for example when he's like directing at a reader's table or yeah. And so it's, I think it was acted so wonderfully by the main actor, keeping his emotions inside but revealing them through his actions up until like the climax where he is visiting the hometown with his driver, and then he like breaks down and expresses his emotions. But yeah, I think the film took almost that same vibe of a person that's trying to be stoic and breaking down slowly and slowly and slowly with the audience in that sense. Is like we're kind of stoic towards the film and it's like breaking us down a little by little, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like his experience with art and how that influenced his character, and how like the play was connected to his real life emotions and what was going on in his life. It was such a beautiful portrayal of how art affects each of us in our own kind of lives and ideas, and it really made me think about like how and why I need art in my life and why film is so impactful for me. And I mean, you can tell I like this film a lot. That's an understatement. But this is just another example of, you know, um, breaking down how art can really give us a chance to look into our lives and look into other people's perspectives and ideas and try to have empathy for others. And I think that's one of the things the film did best of all.
Hmm. Um, Speaking of that, the play brings up what I feel is my most treasured aspect of art, or specifically film, is as like a communicational tool. um, it's a lot harder for me to like word words and like formulate arguments than to like show a film or like think of a film when I'm going through a certain emotion, you know? And so for me, it's like a communication tool. And so the movie handles that communication of like a character's mental state through the art that he's producing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, I think it was just a genius type move to have characters in the play be speaking different languages, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of my most impressed, or what part I was most impressed by in an acting standpoint or an emotional standpoint, is actually the girl who uses sign language.
It has to be.
Yes,
It
for
has to
sure.
be. Yeah.
She was so good, and her audition is probably my favorite like monologue of the entire movie. Um, there's something about sign language that is used so optimally in this film, and I know that there are been recently a lot of films that have used sign language more, either in its plot or just as like a side character, you know?
Yeah.
But I feel like this one shows the emotion of communication in that language and the beauty that there is in that, you know? You kind of have emotions that are tied to certain languages now, like you might romanticize another language, or you might think, if you're American, like French sounds like so like romantic or something like that, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
I've never found myself thinking that about sign language, and in this movie it almost gave me like a jealousy that I can't communicate so visually like that, you know. um
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there were multiple scenes with her where I feel like the heart of the movie just became so much more relevant. You know, there was a dinner scene with when you find out that she's the wife of the guy that's putting the play together,
Hmm.
which was such a beautiful scene. And you know, a lesser director would have cut that scene
Hmm.
because you know it it was absolutely necessary. But you know, you could argue that it could be cut,
Hmm.
but not really. You can
Yeah.
make a bad argument, but it's almost 3 hours long, so someone might say you
Yeah.
gotta cut it. Absolutely not. It's such a beautiful telling of her strength and her character. But that's only one example. You know, there's that scene, there's the monologue that you talked about, and then it wraps together in the ending scene.
Hmm.
Um, and it ties itself in a bow, and it ends that kind of idea better than I've ever seen explored.
Hmm. And to bounce off of your point about that scene, I feel like it's absolutely necessary, and I can also see people argue against it. But I would argue that if it was not already clear, I feel like the explained part of Drive My Car for me is all about communication and like understanding each other. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's my so if you want to like a nutshell, if you've already watched 9 minutes in and you're like, man, they haven't explained anything. Well, just communication for me, in one like word. But my point is, in that scene, you get to see um, a husband who learned a language just to communicate with his wife, you know, in this true love type aspect. And yet the main character's relationship with his wife, they know the same language. They're like almost completely compatible in like every way. But they still don't communicate, you know? it's this willingness that is demonstrated and this dichotomy of the two relationships that I thought was interesting about that scene the most. And I feel like the movie would be radically different without it. You know?
Yeah, well, communication is just such a big part of it, and then the vessels in which people communicate. Like you're talking about the main character's relationship with his driver,
Mm-hmm.
and how their relationship with the car sprouts into one of the most, if not the most beautiful relationship in the entire film.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about how all of these relationships are connected and the kind of bounds they use to communicate, and it's always a different crux. Like the main character's relationship with the young actor is his wife. His relationship with his wife is through art and storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And his relationship with the driver is the car, and his relationship to, um, like everyone. It's always
Yeah.
like a different idea, and it shows like the uniqueness to every relationship and the ability to communicate being such a complicated and extraordinary topic. And I think that's what gives this film so much life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that it does remind me of a couple other films, but I feel like this one joined a lot of those ideas and presented them in a very coherent and like understandable and emotional way. For example, I think Lost in Translation is a good example of a film that's very much like this, um, like something more akin to like Manchester by the Sea at the same time. Um, yeah, but those things kind of tackle their own separate thing, and although I wouldn't say hoping, but in for more surrealism and more um, mind bendy stuff happening. I think that they use just enough of that disorientation. Maybe not even in like surrealism, but just in the way the story's told and like chronological and in like different um, like different shots and the writing and all that kind of stuff in the perfect way to describe the story.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I got a lot out of was the fact that I knew very little about this movie
Mm-hmm.
before I came in and watched it, because I didn't expect a story like this. It's actually a pretty conventional storytelling method.
Yeah.
I've seen relationships like this before, not quite as complex
Mm-hmm.
and meandery, but I think it's what's inside. It's the little details, as the young actor told the main character. It's the little details that really elevate this film. And you're talking about other movies. I think the movie Columbus, the
Oh
2017 movie
yeah.
that we actually did an episode
I
on, if you
mostly
wanted to
forgot.
watch it. It has a very similar relationship, I
Oh
think,
yeah.
between John Cho's character and the younger woman who's
Mm-hmm.
about to go to college.
Yeah.
It's very similar. It's not the same, but it's similar in Drive My Car, in which a younger male figure or an older male figure, a younger female figure. In this case, it's more of a father-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
Um, but I think this film did it even better than Columbus, as far as the heart that was involved. Um, and I want to talk about the shot selection as well. The cinematography was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Especially when they're doing the tour and they got to see all the river, is it, or something like that. The driving shots. Sometimes whenever they're in the car and they're just speaking to each other, it's so nice to look out to the like the edges. Um, what else did I like? I feel like Yeah, anything that was outside, pretty much.
Yeah.
There were like, of course, when you're inside, there's like a static type shot in the like surroundings and that kind of stuff. But always outside, it like matched what was going on, and there was like rain sometimes and fall sometimes, and
Yeah, and it really it stuck with nature, and it never pulled away too soon. It put a lot of love into the driving scenes. It was very special to see like them driving on the coast of the island, for
yeah,
example. Ocean shots. Um, like you were saying, even the trash compactor place, everything in Hiroshima. It was so beautiful, and it didn't feel like they needed to do anything extra with the cinematography or the color correction or anything. They just knew that the scenery speaks for itself.
yeah. And I think that has a lot to do with framing. So I feel like this movie is framed like so well,
Oh,
especially in the beginning when it like pans through their house and then their like bookcase and then like the stereo and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen shots like that or like of those subjects like 1,000 times, you know. But there's something maybe about like foreign. Maybe it's just because I'm not used to it, but like foreign films. Um, use of a different type of framing or more I wouldn't say unique, but a more ab- not abstract. What is it called? Just different
yeah,
than I'm used to. That intrigues me every single time. For example, there is scenes like that in Parasite. Besides like the whole shot of like the glass, like going out to the garden, there's like shots of like music playing, the shots of like bookcase and that kind of stuff. But a combination of like the architecture that's really different and um, just the framing that foreign films have. I'm not exactly sure again if it's like solely unique to one director or like it's just the normal trends of filmmaking in those industries that catch my attention so much more than regular shots like that, you know?
yeah. And speaking to that, talking about the Japanese film industry, um, they don't make so many live action films anymore in Japan that hit it big internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Most of their money is dedicated to anime, which I love anime. I'm glad they're making anime, and it's great. But I love to see live action Japanese films because they have such a rich history in film and in culture in film
Yeah.
that it's exciting for me to see a Japanese live action film that's making this big splash as of recently, because it's been a while since something like this has happened. Maybe Shoplifters was the last one.
Did you see that one?
I did, and it's
Mm.
amazing. It's such a great film, but I think that's something I want to see more of is Japanese live action films because I think they have such a great perspective and cinematography.
Mm-hmm. So I have two questions for you then. What did you think of the soundtrack or the sound in general, I guess?
Well, I the sound in general I thought was beautiful, especially the callback to the silence from the opening scene to one of the last scenes.
Mm-hmm.
That was very palpable, and it was very well done. It was a great callback. Certain things in the soundtrack I think were the weakest part to me.
Mm-hmm.
When music was just telling me how to feel when I didn't feel like I needed to be told. God
Yeah.
damn it. Um, but I think that was very minor.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the soundtrack was very good for most of the time, and it was just a couple scenes every once in a while here and there that I think was a little too obvious.
Yeah, I asked you because I was going to bring that up as well. I felt like there are some scenes that stuck out to me in terms of the sound, and generally that's not the best case scenario for me because it's like either the soundtrack is like stand out let's say for example like Inside Out,
Oh,
and it'll be
such a great soundtrack.
yeah, and it'll be played like really fast paced, and it'll be like really fun scene, and then the same melody will just be like played slowed down, and it's like that's a sad scene, and like
Hmm.
the versatility of the soundtrack there. Whenever it spikes, it usually just means that there's like some type of different sound that's used almost as a cue,
Hmm.
for the audience, and that just means that there's not a lot of well, there might be a consistency, but there is a disruption of consistency that I notice, and so
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna bring up. I too love the silence, and I almost wish they utilized it more. Although I haven't thought of this film long enough to be like, oh, if like what exactly or like where exactly, and if it were used more, would it diminish like the hard hitting moment that it does occur?
Hmm.
But it left me wanting more at the very least, So that's always a good thing, even if even if I might disagree with the amount of times it's used. But
Yeah, I feel like it's better that way than the other way around.
yeah, uh-huh. But yeah, the also the upticks of these moments that I notice it almost diminish the underlying soundtrack too. I find it a little bit difficult to remember what the um, general score is when all I can remember is these like really emotional um, musical moments, that they're trying to cue.
Yeah, yeah, and I think those musical moments, like, put those to the side. I felt like the sound editing actually was brilliant. I actually thought like how they use sound editing a lot of times was way better than a score ever could be, and I
Mm,
thought their choice to not use a score in certain parts was very good.
yes.
Almost so good that it overshadows when they try to put music in. It's just not as good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is it's pretty good for that to be the worst part of the film because it
Yeah.
really only stuck out. Like, I thought about it one time. It was the only time in the entire movie I was like, that's
Mm-hmm.
not good. Was
Mm-hmm.
like hearing the music one time,
Yeah.
maybe.
No, I agree. It's definitely a very, very minor um, criticism. And I also agree that the most powerful moments are the silent ones in this film. And I,
Hmm.
I love those moments. Um, almost, it was so powerful that it almost further made the underlying soundtrack really, really distant in my memory. And I
Absolutely.
think that's like the best possible case of a criticism there can be because it's like, oh, you're utilizing silence.
Oh
So,
yeah.
mm-hmm.
Well, is there any kind of closing thoughts you have about the movie or anything you want to bring up before we wrap it up?
I think again, I just want to reiterate the communication of it. I think there are another couple of my favorite moments were when there were sign language that wasn't interpreted.
Hmm.
Like between the husband and the wife. Just between them, almost like a conversation that they're just having like real quick before they went back to the table conversation or that kind of stuff. Or other times where they just didn't subtitle stuff. Um, it shows that communication is so much more than words. It's understanding someone is paying attention to all aspects of them, and speech and words is just one. So although the movie is mainly about communication in a general sense, I feel like the communication that we forget a lot of the times is in attention.
Hmm.
um, if you have a partner and you're like, hey, are you doing okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. You just took that as like,
Yeah, don't take that literally.
yeah, if you just read it on a page, that's a lot more um, convincing that it's true than it most likely in real life. And so the choices of a play, of a car, of these like huge symbolic figures to reiterate this more than words type communication is by far the cleverest part of this film, and why it's gonna like honestly be up there, maybe one or two for me. I'm still kind of deciding on my favorite movies of this year. So
Yeah,
2021, I guess.
I completely agree with all of that. And if I had some closing thoughts, one thing that I just wanted to bring up at the very end, like having your introduction last 30 minutes is really fucking cool. When I saw credits after like 35 minutes in the movie, I was like, you gotta be shitting me. That's amazing. I can't believe you had an entire act and then started rolling credits.
I kind of, for some reason, felt it, but it was like a whole movie pass, and then the credits roll, and it's like, okay, this is the start of the movie, and it's
Yeah.
like, wait, I just watched a movie.
I was like, I swear to God, I was like, is the movie ending? Like, is that it? Like, that could have been a brilliant short film. But yeah, so there's that. I love it when movies. I love it when you have like the coldest of cold opens, and then you start rolling credits. Like that's just like little things. Like as a movie fan, I just like,
Yeah, I
oh
feel that
god, that's
too.
so awesome.
Uh-huh.
I love it when it starts rolling credits after a while. Um, and you know, and in a more general sense, just looking at the empathy that this movie had, talking about communication, I think even like foundational to that is like the empathy and the gentleness that this film took human life and the human experience, as far as the shot selection and the sound and the music and the act. Well, not the music, the acting. The
Black
music a little
Hero.
bit. It's fine. It's good. Um, and its relationship to art is what impacted me the most, and that's what I'm going to be taking away with it. I watch a lot of movies, you know, obviously, and they all have a special place in my heart. But some movies, I leave the theater and I just start thinking about my life and my relation to it through the movie. And this was an example of that. And it only happens to me once or twice a year. So thank you, Drive My
Yeah.
Car.
Yeah. All right.
And that's it.
Okay, bye.
I hate that shit.